Something peculiar is happening beneath the surface of what looks like another ordinary moment. The signals are scrambled, timelines feel slightly misaligned, and familiar rhythms have quietly gone off beat. Yet somehow this dissonance is working to one's advantage. It's like standing inside a sealed chamber where the air begins to fold inward, not suffocating but recalibrating. Beneath the noise, a kind of silent countdown has already begun, though it won't be heard by those moving too fast or thinking too loud. Most will drift through this distortion unaware, mistaking the soft tilt of reality for simple mood swings. But what if the space itself is stretching? What if the rules of resistance are being quietly rewritten? That might explain why logic feels both distant and irrelevant. Does that idea seem far-fetched or strangely accurate? Pause for a second. Not everything announces itself with thunder. Some turning points arrive disguised as static in the signal. As this charge cycle nears its edge, something faint but unmistakable begins to press through the seams. It doesn't scream, it hums, louder each day, like a forgotten frequency returning to range. Strange little moments that might have once been brushed off, a flickering streetlight, a phrase overheard, a timing too precise to ignore, now feel like clues left out in plain sight. These aren't coincidences. They're friction sparks, heat generated just before metal bends. Ever notice how lately everything seems just a bit exaggerated? Not chaotic, just magnified. The smallest details feel oddly scripted, a door creaking like it's trying to speak, a song lyric perfectly landing on a passing thought. That's not coincidence. That's calibration. There's a signal brushing against the edge of conscious reception, and the static is turning into syllables. If things have felt a little too heavy, too exact, too timely, well, isn't that curious? Why now? What is it about this moment that couldn't wait? Maybe consider this. When the keeper of sequence abandons the clock and enters the room without knocking, something in the timeline fractures. Not in destruction, but in design. Ever thought about what that means? Maybe it's not the world getting louder. Maybe the settings finally match the message. You're not here by mistake. If this felt like home, it probably is. Subscribe and stay where the deeper truths live. One of the core tensions pressing against the fabric of this exact moment stems from a deeper structural jolt. Something tectonic just shifted gears. The principal force governing pattern and permanence has now entered a domain where movement matters more than perfection. This isn't a graceful entrance. This is force cracking the surface. Think less of meditation cushions and more of a generator roaring to life at 3 a.m. The old frameworks aren't being asked for revision, they're being steamrolled by urgency. This is not the kind of presence that waits to be invited. It's the kind that dismantles detours and dares stillness to speak up. And in truth, most systems weren't designed to handle this pace. The very combination at play now feels unnatural, like strapping a compass to lightning. But oddly, it creates acceleration that couldn't happen otherwise. What unfolds under this configuration is a compression of time. What would have stretched across seasons is now unfolding in pulses. The door doesn't creak open, it blasts off the hinges. Sound familiar? Then here's something to consider. Are these disruptions actually chaos, or are they just the result of linearity giving way to momentum? The current tone of existence is not one of contemplation, but ignition. This moment isn't teasing potential, it's applying pressure until it erupts. Decisions will happen fast, reactions will be immediate, and clarity won't wait around to explain itself. The presence being felt here doesn't remove obstacles, it renders them irrelevant. What rises now doesn't rise slowly, it launches. This isn't just another phase passing through. It's a tempo setter, one that recalibrates how reality responds. Match it, and the feedback loop begins to echo louder than ever before. Forget gradual. The lunar presence isn't the signal, it's the fuse catching flame. If you felt something here, like it was meant just for you, maybe it was. Subscribe. No need to explain it, just stay. This slice of time is not idle, it's kinetic. Every word spoken, every instinct acted upon, every subtle shift in behavior is part of a larger electrical script already unfolding. There's no negotiation happening here, no moment to workshop intentions or rearrange priorities. The atmosphere isn't asking, it's mirroring. What materializes next is not born from desire, but from the frequency that's already been set in motion. And like most real shifts, it won't show up in a parade. It arrives as static, then accelerates. The lunar alignment forming now is less a ceremony than it is a pressure seal, waiting for the release. Action isn't optional in this window. Stillness doesn't neutralize the wave. It simply allows it to pass untouched. The real leverage lies in deliberate momentum, not noise, not ritual, just unapologetic motion. The absurd part? This isn't going to happen when incense burns or affirmations echo in a room filled with crystals. No, the pulse will land when the body is distracted, mid-swipe, mid-sigh, mid-thought. It arrives when nothing appears profound, like flicking off the kitchen light and suddenly feeling seen. The shift may disguise itself as a flicker of memory, a strange emotion with no origin, or a breath that tastes too crisp for its setting. That's when it will find the crack. And no, this isn't cosmic theater. It doesn't want performance. It wants presence. What causes the ignition is not sound or sequence. It's internal charge reaching the surface. That unexplainable moment where time feels elastic, when gravity feels kind for a second. Ever had that? Then maybe it's already started. Because this surge doesn't knock. It pulses from the inside. And when it arrives, nothing moves. But everything changes. Truth rarely arrives with a bang. More often, it slips through unnoticed, carried in the quiet just after the noise falls away. That's the strange thing about alignment. It doesn't feel like fire. It feels like stillness. When the internal rhythm finally settles into coherence, something clicks. Not because a bell rang or a mantra echoed, but because the inner field finally stopped vibrating long enough to receive something real. These moments aren't bookmarked by dramatic music or life-changing conversations. They show up like a ripple on calm water, barely visible, but undeniable. The clarity doesn't crash through the wall, it passes through the seams. Some don't even notice it until hours later, when a forgotten thought becomes a sudden understanding. That recognition, the kind that rearranges perception without needing permission, comes quietly. But here's a real question. How often is that missed because the signal was drowned in the search? If something inside you felt still while watching this, it means you're aligning. Subscribe and stay close, because the transmission continues. And here's where things get unusual. These internal thresholds don't just offer insight, they invite echoes of desires that seem to vanish. What once felt like a closed door is now slightly ajar. Not because it was forced open, but because time folded back in on itself. That unanswered call, that missed window, that dream that felt buried, it may reappear in a form unrecognizable at first glance. A casual message, an old name, a new offer that smells like an old wish. These are not intrusions. They're reflections returning to their original sender. What once went unclaimed has simply been waiting for alignment, not approval. And in spaces like this, unassuming, unmarked, those delayed arrivals begin to find their way back. The universe doesn't forget, it recalculates. There's something oddly gentle about what's surfacing now. Not a test, not a lesson, but something that feels like an overdue message finally making it through the static. It doesn't arrive like revelation. It lands more like an old email that somehow escaped the inbox and still manages to matter. There's a subtle retrieval happening here, a quiet current pulling from deep within the timeline, answering requests that were never truly canceled. This is not nostalgia, it's recognition. A version of the self that once reached forward is now, at long last, being met halfway. And while these events might seem random on the outside, their emotional fingerprint is unmistakable. A past application, a forgotten connection, a plan once shelved under the weight of bad timing. This isn't the cosmos playing catch and release. It's a backlog being processed. Here's where it gets interesting. Not all longings come with expiration dates. Some of them simply wait. Wait for alignment, for climate, for the inner field to match what was once misaligned. What didn't arrive then wasn't lost. It was rerouted. And this current window doesn't bring replacements. It delivers what was always meant to return. So if something reappears now, half familiar, oddly well-timed, maybe pause before dismissing it as coincidence. Ever think about how many unanswered calls were never declines, just delays? Because that's what this feels like. A confirmation finally catching up with the question. And it doesn't need explanation. It just needs to be recognized. What's coming next might just be the missing piece you didn't know you were looking for. Hit subscribe, because the next message wasn't meant to be missed. A peculiar pattern begins to take shape. One that feels too precise to be random, but too subtle to feel scripted. Phrases land mid-conversation that sound eerily tailored. Old memories resurface through symbols embedded in daily life. A street name, a scent, a song. These are not staged moments. They are recalibrated signals emerging in sync with a version of reality just beginning to crack open. This isn't coincidence, it's architecture. A kind of coded recall built into the fabric of time, waiting for a version of consciousness clear enough to register it. What's forming now is not some reward for effort or clarity. It's a response to a signal once broadcast by a self who didn't know how far that signal would travel. So when reality nudges in an oddly familiar direction, pause for a second. Not every map looks like a map. Some trails are buried in repetition. Here's the strange part. The real message might look like nothing. It might come as an overheard phrase that makes no sense, a dream fragment that loops throughout the day, or a strange synchronicity that won't let go. It won't arrive as prophecy. It won't sparkle. In fact, it may feel misplaced, even trivial, until it doesn't. These are not metaphors. They're mechanisms. Not because they hold answers now, but because they're designed to unlock something later. These fragments don't reveal meaning immediately because they're not for the current mindset. They're time-stamped for future resonance. And when they arrive during moments like this, they tend to land harder, pressing on something just below awareness. The question is, have any of them found their way into your day already? Think carefully. That one awkward comment, that misplaced sentence, that detail that shouldn't matter but lingers anyway. It's not the resolution, it's the setup. And when it clicks, it won't just make sense. It'll feel like it was always there, waiting to be seen from the right angle. Once the deeper mind settles into a receptive state, the field tends to throw something unexpected into the mix. Not a crisis, not a revelation, but something so absurd it feels like the universe is testing its own punchlines. This isn't chaos, it's choreography. Not all communication from the unseen arrives dressed in sacred robes. Sometimes it wears mismatched socks and arrives riding a metaphorical shopping cart just to see if perception is truly awake. In moments like this, the cosmic current often chooses mischief as its carrier wave. Laughter, after all, bypasses resistance. And when energy finally breaks free from the rigid structures of expectation, the release often sneaks in through a back door called irony. Over the next stretch of hours, strange timings will likely escalate. A notification chimes right as a memory resurfaces, or a random comment lands with eerie accuracy. It won't look magical on the surface, more like a sitcom glitch. A squirrel stares too long. A friend's wrong text somehow narrates the inner monologue. These aren't interruptions. They're designed irregularities, echoes in the system meant to redirect attention without triggering defense. Not every sacred transmission comes cloaked in silence. Sometimes it arrives wearing clown shoes. Humor, it turns out, is one of the universe's sharpest tools for delivering resonance without resistance. And if nothing else, it proves that presence doesn't always have to be poetic to be real. There's a quiet kind of brilliance in these moments. They often slip past the analytical filters and land directly in the emotional body. An odd sentence, a recurring image, a moment so absurd it demands re-examination. These are not jokes. They're calibration points. And perhaps the real test isn't awareness, but openness. Can the ridiculous hold weight? Can nonsense become instruction? There's always that moment in a film when the protagonist receives a bizarre clue they don't yet understand. What if this is that moment? What if this is the wink from reality, not asking for answers, but reminding the system it's already involved in something larger? Maybe the most telling signals are the ones that don't fit, because they weren't meant for the version that's looking for them. In the span of the coming hours, there will be a peculiar category of events. Ones that feel oversized for the moment, a message appearing without context, a stranger's comment that feels staged, an opportunity that seems impossibly timed, or an emotion so vividly specific that it borders on premonition, and then, just as quickly, it's gone. No explanation, no conclusion. Like a trailer with no title card. And that's intentional. This isn't denial, it's pacing. These flashes aren't meant to grant access just yet. They're designed to stabilize the system before the full sequence begins. Sometimes the most compassionate thing reality can offer is a glimpse. Not to tease, but to brace. A preview is not a promise, it's a preparation. And in certain timelines, it's the nervous system that needs the head start, not the storyline. If every truth were handed over at once, the internal grid might buckle. That's why the clues arrive wrapped in delay. The rhythm is not about now, it's about recognition later. When symbols appear without steps to follow, it's not a trap, it's a tuning. And there's wisdom in not chasing what hasn't landed. A vision doesn't become real by being forced. It unfolds when the container expands enough to hold it. So what if what looks like almost is actually right on schedule? What if the moment that made the hair on the arms rise wasn't meant to lead to action, but memory, a bookmark in awareness for something not yet visible? After all, dreams don't always fade because they're false. Sometimes they fade to return more clearly when the terrain is stable. Right now, reality carries a kind of magnetic stillness, a hush that doesn't feel passive, but poised. The emotional weather is thick, the silence has an echo, and everything seems to be holding its breath. Even ordinary spaces seem slightly out of focus, as if the background of daily life has been momentarily paused. Have you felt it too? That subtle delay between thought and motion? That unexplained weight resting just beneath the ribs? This isn't tension, it's the architecture of anticipation, the structure of space rearranging itself not for spectacle, but for arrival. And while it may be difficult to name what exactly is approaching, the body already knows. Because what's coming doesn't need to announce itself. It only needs to be noticed. Right now, the entire system feels like it's bracing, not out of suspense, but calibration. This isn't tension for the sake of tension. It's anticipation without urgency. The atmosphere is paused, not stuck. And what's most compelling is that the next motion won't come from the outside. It will emerge from inside the field. This is the rare phase where the architecture of time has gone soft, pliable enough to respond directly to presence. And what happens within this window doesn't just influence immediate outcomes. It becomes embedded in the structural pulse of what comes next. The selections made in this brief liminal zone are not just choices, they're instructions. They stretch out beyond the moment, shaping the curvature of future patterns in ways that won't be obvious until much later. This is not about pressure, it's about potency. When space is this receptive, it doesn't need volume, it needs clarity. A withdrawal carries as much force as an arrival. A decision made without fanfare can shift the arc of the next 3 months. That's the nature of this particular convergence. It magnifies subtlety. And here's a strange truth. This period is not marked by external events, but internal alignment. It's the pause before the echo, the final moment before direction crystallizes. And when movement finally happens, the path will respond as though it had been waiting. Ever wondered what it feels like to be fully mirrored by the moment? This is it. Not because of who is watching, but because the conditions are right for response. Intention becomes directive, resonance becomes roadmap. What's unfolding now isn't casual. The next 2 days are not random placeholders in the calendar. They are exact spatial markers, coordinates within a wider rhythm that only opens when specific pulses intersect. And they just have. So here's the real question. What if this isn't a decision point at all? What if it's a signal point, a chance to imprint something before momentum kicks in? Because once the gate shifts back into solid form, the echo is locked in. This moment will not be loud, it will not repeat itself, but it will linger, woven into the days that follow. What has been circling for months is not circling anymore. It's approaching, and the shape it takes may depend on one simple variable: Presence. The general theme of the channel is based on universal wisdom, ancient teachings, astrology, modern thought, the subconscious, existence, and philosophical depth. Therefore, all texts produced are expected to have a depth similar to those written by thinkers such as Carl Jung, Alan Watts, Joseph Campbell, or contemporary consciousness researchers. However, despite this intellectual style, the text should not contain the names of any historical figures, copyrighted expressions, or direct references to original sources. The content should be characterized solely by metaphorical expressions and universal themes. In addition to all these rules, the text should be written as if it were addressing people directly, and the balance between conversation and universal elements within the paragraph should be maintained. Because the more scientific and profound you speak, the less people understand and the more bored they become. Rules. The main idea of each paragraph must be preserved. Sentence structure, order, metaphors, examples, and word choices will be changed 100%. Paragraphs should be unique enough to be unrecognizable, but the main message should be preserved. Existing metaphors will never be used. Instead, completely different metaphors will be created. For example, if there is a metaphor for wind, other symbols such as fire, root, shadow, light, or vibration will be used instead. The original paragraph length will be strictly maintained. For example, if it is 1,000 characters, it should remain close to 1,000 characters, neither more nor less. There will be no title. The text should not address the target audience as you. The written language should be close to American culture, target an audience over 25 years old, and be casual yet intellectual in style. The expressions should be sincere yet profound, accessible yet thought-provoking. There should be a natural synthesis between science, philosophy, metaphysics, and spirituality. But this should be balanced with simplicity. Each paragraph should be written as a coherent whole, consisting of an introduction, development, and conclusion, and should be written in essay form. While conversing with the audience, it is necessary to occasionally break the fourth wall and ask the audience questions to ensure they are fully immersed in the flow of the video.